Stay with us for Newsmaker Live. I'm Clinton Reynolds, and this evening we're discussing a very touchy topic, that of prostitution, and we have no better people than the two gentlemen we have on our set, Bishop McLaurin of the Fellowship of Gospel Preaching Churches, and social activist, RISE co-founder, and many other things, Dr. Stephen King. And we have had a very good first break. The two men have laid out their positions from a spiritual or religious standpoint, and also from a social standpoint. So the question, back to the question I was asking, I mean, we don't claim to be infallible. However, we want to come down on people who are sinners, just like we are. What position, what right do we have to judge people who are just as sinful as we are? You know, we might say probably just a little bit more because, you know, but who are we to judge?
I don't think we are the one who, I don't think we have any right to judge, because judgment remains, or is God's own. He's the one who judges us. He's the only just person in the universe, so to speak. And he's the one who judges. But I think he, being the sovereign ruler, because from our theological point of view, our worldview, we see God as sovereign ruler. We see him, we don't see him as the days puts it, he's removed from society. We see him as involved in the affairs of mankind, in the development and growth of mankind, and we see him as very active in a progressive way, bringing man to an unexpected end, that he desires to be with man, to dwell with him. And so the whole theological debate is how you go through that process to get there, and God is bringing us through. Now, in that whole discussion and argument, God has set principles and laws that are supposed to operate. While we love the sinner, and must be very clear, I don't think it's something to bash the prostitute. I think the prostitute, because we're looking at the reasons for prostitution, there are many reasons, and Doc was touched some of it, and I want to add even incest, because even in my pastoral counseling, I find out that I remember I did something in Soufrière when I was working in Soufrière, pastoring in Soufrière. I found there were some people, young people coming from a certain area, and then they were at 14 years, they were loose at nights playing. So I called them in my office. And I said, tell me why you behave that way. What is happening? And I would just have a fatherly talk to the 13, 14-year young girls. And they told me they were not looking for sex. The guys were taking advantage of them at night. They just wanted somebody to tell them they loved them. They just wanted somebody to embrace them. Just wanted somebody to make them feel important. And that touched my heart, really touched my heart. And because they were, in the day, they were called all kinds of names in the little tongue, because they were walking around and stuff like that. At night, the guys wanted to pull them around, whatever, you know. But the reality is they didn't want to be in that situation. And then I've developed a concept that, listen, these persons are persons who have needs. Sometimes it's incest. Sometimes it's a social environment they are involved in. Sometimes they are forced into prostitution. And the stories you hear from my concept is crazy. Mothers who force children into prostitution for survival. And so sometimes a child develops and becomes a prostitute, or somebody develops and becomes a prostitute. It's not by their own choice. Sometimes they are dealing with a lot of social issues and emotional problems and stuff like that. So the church position must be one of loving that person who's in that situation. But in the same token, we must help them find a way out of that situation as much as possible. And also, while we do not condemn them, but we must let them know that their actions are wrong. They are not biblical, they are not right actions. And I think one of the problems because the condemning issue is one that society we need to deal with, because the first thing we do, we condemn and pull down a person. We need to find why are they in that situation.
But from what you're describing to me, your sentiments seem to be in sync with what Doc is saying about going ahead and decriminalizing, you know, ensuring that the person is not dehumanized further,
right,
you know, by dragging them before a court and saying, oh, all right, you're a criminal for engaging in such an act, you know. Whereas you don't promote or you don't endorse what they're doing, but you're not going to tell them that you're subhuman, you're a bad person because you have engaged in that act. It's the act that is wrong, according to what you're saying, and not the person. Doc?
Yeah, and in fact, two things. One, sin, I think, is in the realm of the church and the Bible and God's law, and I fully respect that. And I mean, yes, the Bible is quite clear on prostitution, and I think that to say it's a sin, the church says so, the Bible says so, I agree, not a problem. But to say that it's a crime is another story. To say that person is a criminal, that is where I would then say no, because I don't believe that every sin has to be a crime. And I think that our laws our man's laws, secular laws, are supposed to protect people and allow us to work with people who need, with vulnerable people, protect these vulnerable people and allow us to work with them. And that is why I don't like this particular clause or this particular section of the prostitution laws. Because, as you think you quite eloquently said, I don't believe that people that are in the prostitution selling their bodies are doing it because they like to sell their bodies. I think they're doing it because of either internal or external constructs that make them believe that this is the way that they have to, what they have to do. And I understand fully, and people out there probably saying, oh, I know prostitutes really enjoy having sex. But I can tell you, this multiple sex partners and promiscuity is actually something that can happen from people who have been sexually abused and have been sexualized in an inappropriate and damaged, and their self-esteem is so low that their sense of self-worthiness is one that they will self-abuse and allow themselves to be abused, and even get a certain amount. Their coping mechanism might well be one of they appear to be quite happy. But I think when you really speak to them and you really start to do work with them, you realize that they are not happy and they would not want to be there. And that's why I think that particular law is, I think, a bad one. I think it's an unjust one. I think it's socially unjust. And I think, to go back into other doctrines, Thomas Aquinas himself is one who said, if there's unjust law, speak out against it. So I think it is clear, and that's one of my positions. The other one was, we were talking about decriminalization and legalization, and just to respond a little bit to Bishop McLaurin and hear what he thinks about it. If you decriminalize that particular section that says the woman is no longer a criminal, it does not, the rest, brothels and pimping and aiding and abetting and renting facilities, all of those things can still remain criminal offenses. But that clause can release the woman from being considered a criminal. And I think that does not necessarily open the floodgates at all. What it does, it opens those vulnerable people to programs that we can put in place together and to help. So people say, well, where's your evidence that this thing works? And I remember in the articles I put out, I've pointed to the Swedish experience where they've decriminalized for the women, right? And they have not shown an increase. In fact, they've shown a decrease in the prostitution. So, and those documents are there for people to read. So I think it's how you do it, and it's the manner in which we do it. And I think the way we have to do it is, I'm a public health practitioner. I believe that if we go forward with good public health principles, and we go forward with what one of my mentors, Martin Luther King, says, tough-minded, soft-hearted. We need to be tough-minded and soft-hearted. We need to be compassionate with tough mind. And in fact, he also quotes in that same speech that science and religion. Science is knowledge, which is power. Religion is values, which is guidance. If science and religion in a society can find congruence and a way to speak and work together, that is wisdom.
And I think we're beginning to do that here, because from listening to both of you, I am understanding, if I take off the religion, I take off the science, I take off the activism in there, I'm seeing that you're pretty much on the same page. We're looking at victims.
Trying to help the human
being. Right, exactly. Trying to address the victims, which prostitutes are most of the time. And even going back to religion and going back to the Holy Book, we see that Jesus himself, in his walk on earth, he was more attracted to the more vulnerable in the society, those who were destitute, those who did not have as much, those who were just crying out to someone in society to hear them, to see them, to listen to them. And he was the one who came and reached out to them. He did not cast them away like, some of his disciples had asked him to do. So to me, we're heading along the same way.
I think we are, but even the analogy you bring with regards to Jesus, very clearly the difference comes in where that transformation, because even in Jesus's teaching, you would find that he would meet with the prostitutes, he would meet with the Mary Magdalenes, and he would meet with them. But there was something about his message that was life transforming, that these persons would leave the lifestyle that they were in and move into a new understanding. Now we are hoping that whatever program that society could come together, and I'm in agreement that religion, government, and social services, sciences, they must come together and realize this is a serious problem and we all need to come on board. But then what from a theological religious point of view, there is a transforming aspect where that person moves from, and that's what Jesus talks about, that the person moves from one state to a next, that they are transformed from a life that was deprived, or so to speak, a life that was lacking, though whatever circumstances that brought them into it, but then he offered them life and he offered them to move from that state into a new state. And so for the woman at the well, she was transformed. For Mary Magdalene, she was changed. And so there's a transformation that takes place. And I think maybe that's the missing dimension, that whatever we talk about the prostitution issue, that yes, we tell them, okay, let's get out of that mess, but what do we offer them? The fact of will, which I didn't touch, is in place. A person's will and choice. Because a person could say, well, I enjoy this, even though they are not. Because based on the research and the thing I'm reading out on that, I realize most people that are in it, 81% in some of the studies say that they don't want to be in it, and stuff like that.
But they're so damaged already that they don't think that there's any way out.
And they might not even feel that valuable. They might just feel that you're trapped and stuff like that,
Yeah, I mean, as we say, Christ was powerful enough to put his hand and say, go and sin no more, and that was it. When nowadays we have to put a program in place that can transform, right? I mean, that's how it is now, But I need to say something. Just maybe I think we have to go to a break, but I think just one thing. Don't let me forget. When we come back, there is a third position, and I think we need to understand that and say and talk a little bit about that, which is we spoke about the legalization. There are people who would say that that this should be handled like a job and a regulated job, right? And that's a better way to handle it. And I've taken some flack from my own position, which is not that. I've taken some flack from people who feel that way, all right? But I think what I try to tell people is that, look, we live in this culture, and what we have to do is we have to find our solutions in our culture that fit for us and our people. We cannot just adopt somebody else's ideas without putting it through our tough-minded, soft-hearted approach. We are compassionate, but we have to be sensible and know who we are and what we're trying to achieve.
When we come back, we'll discuss the litmus test, and also I wanted us to talk about counterfeits, because we're trying to save our society, but in dealing with counterfeits, especially from a religious standpoint, I want us to spend a little bit of time on that. So when we come back, we'll continue to discuss with Bishop Emmanuel McLaurin and Dr. Stephen King. Stay with us. Newsmaker Live will continue right after this.